Oh, hello again, folks. Oh, hi, Mark.
Hi there,
Hi, Shawn.
Hi there.
That flipped over a new leaf. Okay.
Welcome to the Three Wise Men of Divorce, Money, Psych, and Law podcast. Sit down with the California divorce experts, financial divorce consultant Mark Hill, psychologist Scott Weiner, and attorney Shawn Weber for a frank and casual conversation about divorce, separation, co-parenting, and the difficult decisions real people like you face during these tough times. We know that if you are looking at divorce or separation, it can be scary and overwhelming. With combined experience of over 70 years in divorce and conflict management, we are here for you and look forward to helping by sharing our unique ideas, thoughts, and perspectives on divorce, separation, and co-parenting.
The wise men of divorce are back again for another stimulating conversation. And I'll tell you what, maybe the whole core of the issue that we're discussing and have been discussing over and over again rests in the concept of, we speak of divorce and divorce and divorce, and how about speaking of marriage? If we could marry sensibly somehow, you people could put us out to pasture where we belong.
We'd be out of business.
We'd be so out of business.
I would be fine with that.
I'm thinking about that old song, Love and Marriage. You can't have one without the other. But it's actually marriage and divorce. You can't have the second without the first. So, and I've had people come to me who are entering a second marriage or who are marrying late in life and have substantial assets. And, they're like, what do I do? How can I do this the right way? Perhaps because I screwed up the first time I did it, but perhaps also because I've seen other people make mistakes and I want to avoid them and I don't know the right questions to ask.
It's interesting that we're doing this because as we were rolling up to beginning our discussion, Shawn had mentioned another idea which is basically linked with all this, which is, how do we keep from making the same mistakes over and over again?
Yeah.
I mean, a whole core of my clinical work. Even I would say the root, the very heart and soul of it is helping people with their habits. And my belief is that habit is what makes us civilized, what makes all of this possible, that we can manage to duplicate actions that are good unconsciously and unwittingly. Unfortunately, what worked out once doesn't always work out, and the habit is there whether it is any longer useful or positive. So, yeah, we are likely to make the same mistakes again and again.
Is it true, Scott, that sometimes we get into a habit of dating people that are toxic for us or just aren't a good match for us?
Oh, absolutely, that is true. But we don't do that because they are toxic.
No.
We do that because they are exciting in some kind of way.
I was going to say, because we're toxic. But no, yeah, right. There's something there's an attraction, right?
It can, at the very bottom line, be something as simple as, he is my type. She is my type. And that is as habit-based as habit can be.
So what if your type is great to hang out with and go on a date with and a lot of fun, but then to be married to that type just doesn't seem to work for you?
How about that?
So what do you do then?
What we do, you come to us and then we get to make a living.
And we'll make a good living, right? I always joke,
yes.
I don't know how to save a marriage, but I sure know how to ruin one.
Well, of course. How do you ruin one, Shawn?
Well, one is you can marry a person that's not a good match for you for marriage material and just keep making that same mistake. You can marry people that are fun but aren't necessarily marriage material. You can be very selfish. That's a good way to ruin a marriage.
Well,
you can have affairs. That'll do it.
They teach us in law school that marriage is really a three-way contract. It's between two people and the state.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very serious agreement you're making.
Yeah.
And what is less exciting and less interesting on that first or second date is the deeply, deeply important capability of being responsible to each other and being, as Mark has spoken of, being each other's fiduciary, having those duties to each other. Doesn't that sound romantic? Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Let's have a talk
exciting
about the
thing.
prenup, honey, right before we go home.
Right. Let's talk about, or like the couple I had the other day. He got out of bed, walked around to the other side of the bed, knelt down, and proposed to her.
Okay.
You know, they'd been living together. Okay. All right. Fine. And then they proceeded to talk about the prenup. Not very romantic.
No, but
I mean,
it's better than just after the wedding invitations went out.
Well, that's happened too.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and I was joking with you guys before we went on that I have this curse, and you probably experience it too, where, you know, we've seen enough divorces that we can kind of tell. Or at least I can. I can spot folks, and I'll turn to my wife. Oh, yeah. I give them about 5 years if they're lucky.
And she punches you in the arm if you're lucky.
She's like, shut up. Don't say that. Right. But I mean, I'm usually right.
Which
And so what is it I'm
upset her even
spotting? I'm
more.
not even sure what I'm spotting. It's just kind of a sense, maybe a professional sense of having been, you know, there's just interactions that kind of you spot.
Well, you know what might help our folks out there is if you can actually state what the what some of these signs might be.
Okay.
What do you notice?
All right. So I'm ad-libbing, shooting from the hip here.
Go for it.
Over-involved extended family.
Okay.
When the in-laws are more invested in the wedding than the wedding participants are. That tends to be a bad sign.
I notice either a set of behaviors or even reported history being bandied about of really irresponsible behavior. Sooner or later, that's going to tip, you know, the meter. That doesn't mean they won't be able to recover. And that can be an artifact of simple immaturity that people grow out of. But, you know, when you have people well into adulthood who, you know, have just not managed to be reliable.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Well, and that kind of goes with the in-laws. So, I mean, like, if the person you're marrying has not managed to cut the cord, the umbilical cord, by the time you're planning to marry this person from their parents, chances are that cord is going to remain intact throughout your marriage.
Not to be difficult, but I've seen that save marriages too, though.
Okay. Well, I
can follow that. Where you know, but it's a strange thing because you know, the responsibility end of things is up in the superordinate generation then, as opposed to in the relationship. And it's kind of weird. We were laughing about how unexciting and unromantic it is, but boy, what a feeling of confidence it gives when you really know the other person is reliable and, you know, pulling
So
evenly.
do you run a background check? Do you do a credit check? I mean, seriously.
No, you're so smart.
A credit check is a good idea, actually. Well, I had a gal, I shouldn't say gal, you're not supposed to say gal anymore, woman, who married a man, and he told her what he was and who he was, and it was all made up. It was all story. And then after she was married to him for a while, she realized what he really was and wasn't anything close to what he sold her as far as his background, his career, his life. He sold himself out. He held himself out to be this very wealthy, successful businessman. He was an absolute pauper and a failure in business, and didn't hold many of the positions he said he held. And
So is there a legal consequence to that?
This is where I was going. Law question, law question.
Yeah,
Well,
really.
it can be. I mean, you can get a nullity of marriage. You know, basically, when we say nullity, it's as if the marriage never happened. My former business partner used to say, "We're going to make you a virgin again."
Fraud in the inducement.
Fraud in the inducement. Yeah, fraud in the inducement. Yeah,
I haven't seen that one. I bet you have.
I can count them on one hand, the cases that I've actually seen successfully litigated for fraud in the inducement nullity. But they can happen, sure. The other is, he was sterile and had an STD and didn't tell me about it. And then we got married, and now we can't have children. And on top of that, he gave me an STD. I had that case. And there was she got a nullity for that. There's also void marriages. So if someone happens to be married to somebody else, when they marry you, that's not a marriage. That's a void marriage.
Was the
STD
if it's not consummated, isn't that a situation? Too,
yeah, or the incapacity to consummate.
Right. Yeah.
You know, but it's not like we have marriage police. It's not like we have inspectors coming in and making sure that
that's just in Georgia, I believe.
People are right, that people are actually consummating things. Like, how do you prove
apologies to
that?
folks in Georgia, but the truth of the matter is that is a bit of a there is there's some laws in Georgia that were a little behind.
Yeah, I mean, every state has their weird laws, right? But yeah, I mean, things
So how
like
do
that. I mean, it's not like you have marriage police that are just like inspecting. Like there was a time when you know, in old England where some, you know, the handmaidens would actually come in and inspect the bed sheets to make sure that
right
there was a consummation, or there would be a physical examination of the bride to make sure that A, she was a virgin before, and B, she wasn't after. You know, but we don't do that in America anymore, really. Why are we talking about this?
Because you had the bright idea of saying how we can avoid mistakes.
Well, okay, yeah. So one mistake is know who you're marrying, right?
Right.
Don't marry, you know, and I think there's nothing wrong with doing a background check. Find out if there's a DV history.
Yep.
You know, if there's a domestic violence history, this is probably not somebody you want to marry.
Or somebody who's holding themselves out like your participant as being successful financially, and then when you run the credit report,
you find out
they've
they're not.
got late payments for all the credit cards, you know.
My. Did either of you guys do any of that? I never did that when I got married.
No, but you've met my wife. She's perfect. I'm lucky.
Well, yeah.
But
I mean, the only thing wrong with my wife is her bad judgment. But
I mean, yeah, I mean, she probably shouldn't have
And her
married me,
choice
if
of
the truth
men,
were
you
told.
mean?
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well,
But I mean, okay, so I just said that, and it was kind of obnoxious because I'm sure most people that marry somebody that turns out to be something totally different than what they thought would have talked the same way I just did, right?
yes.
And so maybe I'm jaded enough as an attorney that if I were to get married tomorrow, I probably would do all of that background check, even though I was completely in love. And
I think that one of the things that happens is that people get married too quickly. And, you know, when you marry on impulse, as opposed to really spending some time to get to know somebody, you know, if somebody's telling all these grand stories of richness and business and this, that, and the other, but never quite paying for dinner, you might wonder, or, you know.
So marry slowly, and the corollary to that is divorce quickly. Because well, think about it. I've learned with hiring people, my tendency was always hire the first person through the door that I think I can get along with, and then stay with them even when they're not working out, because I want to make it work, and I picked them. I've learned to do it differently. Hire very slowly, and if it's not working, you know, let's
fire
terminate.
quickly.
Let's fire quickly. Let's move on. Both of us will be happier, you know.
I probably could have saved myself a lot of heartache in business if I'd have been more attentive to that.
I think the hiring part is the corollary to the understanding who you're marrying.
Sure.
Well, yes.
You know who you're marrying.
Slowly.
Well, and the other thing is, once, Toni Morrison said, when a person tells you who they are, believe them. So if you come across a person and they kind of give you some hints as to what kind of personality they have and how they're going to treat people, believe them. I mean, my favorite example is you have somebody, I'm the other woman or the other man, and they've left their spouse for you. Why do you think they're not going to leave you for someone else after that?
Oh, because we're all too great, man. Come on.
Absolutely. I'm perfect. What's your problem? I don't understand.
Right.
The question. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, when somebody tells you who they are, believe them.
Well,
except the
you mean when
sociopath.
somebody shows you who they are.
Yeah.
Because it's like
yeah. Well,
everybody's left somebody for us.
Okay, Mark, you go.
Well, there's the sociopath who is charming and who will, has energy and is exciting and they're fun to be around and they're not who they actually say they are, but they're convincing.
But if you spend some time with that person, Scott, would those sociopathic tendencies kind of show themselves? So like if you do a rush wedding, you might miss it, right? But if you spend...
Well, sure. Unfortunately, the answer to that is yes, but it doesn't help because what they'll keep showing you is the charm, is the charm, is the charm, is the charm. And they, although they're very self-centered, they're unwittingly, it's even deeper than intent. By nature, they are so watching you for your responses, and they are just going to make you smile and smile and smile. But over time, over some time, they'll start to do things like, not show up, or be, and then have a real flip,
leave a boiled rabbit on your stove, things like that.
I don't know about that one. I've never seen that one.
You're talking about the horse.
Remember that movie Fatal Attraction where she left a boiled rabbit?
I thought that was a cat, wasn't it?
It was the rabbit.
Oh, it was the rabbit. Well, what about The Godfather? Just put a horse head in the bed,
That's a perfect example. Michael Corleone was a mafia killer, and she married him, and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to go legit." Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, you can ask me one question about my business,
and that's
Are you involved in it? And this is the one time I'm going to answer in a whole marriage. Are you involved with the crime syndicate? No. He only had to lie to her once.
Did you murder your brother-in-law? No, of course not. What do you think I am? A killer?
Would I leave my sister a widow?
That's right. That's what he said, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why would I do such a thing? She's crazy. She's just crazy telling you that. But that's classic kind of sociopathic kind of stuff, isn't it? Or kind of manipulative stuff.
I don't know how classic it is. It's classical.
It's a good movie.
Film. But for our good people out there who indulge us by listening to us, I think that the serious thought that sits behind all this is, how do I keep from making the same mistake over and over again? And I mean, the only thing that in my honest to God meat and potatoes clinical world I can say is know what kind of mistakes you are prone to.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. My favorite anecdote on this is I had a client who had gone through 4 marriages. And when the 4th one hit, he was feeling pretty low about the 3rd one, and I helped him on 2 of them, I think. And we actually were opposing counsel on his 2nd one, so he liked our work so much that he came to me to hire me to help him in his 3rd divorce. But he said, what I realized is there's one constant in all of these divorces, and it's me. And I said, well, remember back when I told you after the second one that what you needed to do before you thought about getting into a new relationship is get some good, honest to goodness therapy to find out what it is about you that is attracted to or attracts this person that you married that was such a disaster for you. And make sure you don't make that mistake again. I mean, Scott, how would therapy like that work?
If a person comes in with that amount of clear intent, the chances are it would work. First of all, adverb beautifully, but well, I mean, each person is N of one. We're all the same, and yet we're all sort of a bit different. And this sort of a thing could happen for either unconscious reasons or pure conscious error. I mean, again, if a person is feeling a certain kind of an attraction to a certain type, and then the rest of the kinds of things like the reliability and decency stuff we've been talking about somehow gets left to the side, well, now there is that other problem, which he did isolate, which is the one constant in this is me. And maybe all these different choices he made were fine. And the problem is that he wasn't husband material.
Well, I mean, that's the conclusion he reached. He decided, you know what, I'm not going to, 4 is enough. I'm not going to inflict myself on anybody else. And I'm just going to be a bachelor for the rest of my life.
Well,
so I kind of felt bad for him. I mean, he was.
Did you got to know him a little bit? Was he a marriageable man? Or was he reliable? Was he decent? Was he trustworthy? Was he responsible? Did he carry his weight?
Yes, but he had a certain personality. Kind of, if he listens to this, he's going to know it's him, but I think he'll be okay with this discussion. A certain legend in his own mind kind of approach to life.
Okay.
Really sure of himself.
So a bit grandiose and a bit
of a wheeler and dealer, made him brilliant in business.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it probably caused him some trouble in marriage.
So was he wheeling and dealing at home too? Was he able to turn that off when he got home and said, hey, I had a really good day, honey. I did this and did that. Now, what can I do for you?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah. So,
I don't know. I mean, one of the women he married was a lunatic. I mean, I can tell you, she was not tightly wrapped. But maybe he was attracted to that. So maybe that's part of the problem too.
Was she exciting?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, there is that aspect where it's, yes, she's broken, but she's never been with me before and I can fix her because I'm so special. So there is that syndrome.
A little bit of a hero complex.
What I'm hearing from this is we really cannot know for sure. We really cannot be sure when we get married that it will last a lifetime. So what can we do? How can we help people practically with, yes, you get married with the best of intention and all these high hopes, but we should be aware that divorce is statistically a pretty high outcome for everybody.
5 out of 10.
Yeah, and for second marriages, it's more than for first marriages. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is. It increases the more marriages there are.
With each marriage, it's exponential.
Yeah.
In fact, it's not really half of all marriages fail. Half of all first marriages do not fail.
Exactly.
It's the second and third marriages that skew the results.
Yeah.
I see.
So what can we do? Well, first of all, let me be a financial guy here. Let's
do that.
Make sure we know what we own and can prove it the day we get married. Nobody, they don't say, okay, I'm getting married in the morning. We're going to have the bachelor party on Thursday and I get married on Saturday. So on Friday, what I'm going to do is print out account statements of all my brokerage accounts, my bank accounts, my 401k, I'm going to make sure I've got that letter from my mom and dad that says that they gave me $100,000 9 years ago that I put into this house where this soon-to-be wife of mine and I have been living. Get your ducks in a row financially so that you have it. Pray you never need it. But at least then, if there are what we call separate property claims, because you had stuff before you got married, then what you would do basically is now have all the documents you're going to need. So that's a practical thought. And I don't think it's being pessimistic. I think it's just being,
I think it's
smart.
and it's also being a good steward to your spouse.
Exactly.
Folks, did you notice what he said about the timing of that the day before the wedding?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably too late.
Which is to locate that benchmark point.
Well, if you have access to it, that's the date you want, because you want the date of marriage valuation. Now, nobody usually spends their honeymoon printing out their statements, and it's usually the farthest thing from your mind at that point. But you want to have that information. Because if your marriage lasts 7 years, the banks don't have the records.
Yeah.
They keep it for 7 years. The IRS, that we're required to keep our tax returns for, I think, 7 years. Anybody want to guess how long the IRS keeps them? 5 years. You cannot get a tax return that's 6 years old from the IRS if you've lost what you filed with them.
Wow. Not even a transcript?
Nope, nothing. It's gone. Because I tried one time, because there had been a mislaid.
How are they going to audit you if it's longer than 5 years?
Proof is upon you. They don't have a record of it. I guess they don't go back more than 5 years.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it was fascinating to me, because I called the IRS because we had trying to get records from earlier years, a lot more than 5 years back, because we had an issue with the house that had been purchased back in the 90s before we were rolling capital. Well, it was like buying a new house, establish a new basis. Back in the old days, we rolled the basis of our old homes into it. So these people had lived in their house for 25 years, but they'd owned 2 houses before. And so we needed to know what the basis was. And what they used to do was put a form on the back of the tax return. And it says, this is the basis in your new house. And that all went away in 98. Nobody cares anymore. But if you happened to buy your house in 97 and you'd owned a couple of houses before, you do not know how much tax you owe.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this before. I'm a big fan of the prenup, especially with a second marriage. And the prenup process requires that level of disclosure,
My goodness.
People need to, I think the prenup is so good because it forces the conversation about the money so that you can make sure you're on the same page. And I've had people in the prenup process decide, you know what, we're not going to get married. And at first I used to think, oh gosh, I think maybe the prenup process broke up their marriage. And then I realized, no, what broke up their marriage is they shouldn't have been getting married. And the prenup process revealed that to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so whether it's a prenup or not, having that detailed conversation about the money and what's going to happen, I think people just skip over that because it's not romantic.
Yeah, no one wants to have that conversation.
That prenup prevented a train wreck, and instead they just didn't get on the train, They didn't
get on the train. Well, I remember telling this. I remember this woman in particular. I mean, the agreement he wanted her to sign was so onerous, so horrid that I could not. I told her, I said, I cannot recommend that you sign this. This is a horrid agreement for you. And she was really upset. And she ended up not marrying him over it. And I think, okay, bullet dodged.
Yep.
Maybe that's okay. Watch, I'll probably get letters. How dare you screw up these people's engagements? But they just asked me, what does the prenup mean for me? And it really what it did is it exposed some attitudes that were just not compatible for them. I said to her, if you want to marry this guy knowing that that's what's going to happen if you get divorced, then by all means, my job isn't to tell you not to do it. My job is just to tell you what your exposure is.
And the great thing about doing the prenup is it requires you don't have to spend the honeymoon printing out your statements, because the prenup will list out the separate property assets that you both have at that time. There it is, identified, account numbers, dollar amounts. Now, a lot of the money that my firm makes is sorting out the mess when there isn't a prenup. So we talk about avoiding mistakes. We have a case right now with a client who has, Shawn, basically rolled various different retirement accounts from his fairly long career into one account that he essentially was contributing separate property before the marriage in his contributions to his retirement plan, marital property during the marriage, plus converting a number of different accounts into that account from separate property that he had from accounts prior to the marriage into that account. And then he got separated, and he's been making separate property since. Can you imagine the complexities of tracing the returns on all those contributions and where the money came from and who gets what? It's a full employment act for Pacific Divorce Management, because we have to trace every one of those pieces of cash flow, work out how the returns were on those every single month, up or down, and do the separate property plus the community property shares. I mean, it's a lot of work, and no one thinks about it. He was just, I don't want statements from 4 different financial institutions. We'll just put it all in Schwab. Made sense. And it would have made sense if he'd stayed married.
We're running out of time, guys. We're to that point. But I have 3 takeaways. Let's see if you agree with these 3 takeaways. I'm going to call them, I just wrote them down. The 3 no's, not N-O, but K-N-O-W. Know who you are marrying. Number 1. Number 2, know yourself. Number 3, know the money. Am I missing anything?
Know the family.
That's the 4th no. Know the family. Because you really are marrying the in-laws too.
Yep.
And if there's children, children of the other person,
yep,
know those kids.
Better know them too.
This is not good. Blended families are hard. So know that. And know your own boundary with those kids.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've got a case like that I'm consulting on now, where that's kind of what's going on.
As much as we think in terms of how ancient the old arranged marriage realities are,
there's some sense to it.
Some of them worked out rather well.
Well, they have a higher success rate than what we do.
Yep.
They really do. So
I suppose the pressure to stay married in those cultures and how.
And actually, one of the biggest challenges I have is with divorcing couples who are both first-generation Americans of immigrant parents.
Yeah,
the immigrant parents were in arranged marriages, and even though they married within their culture, they did it for they chose each other as opposed to being chosen for them. And those marriages are less successful too than the ones where they're arranged, even in this country,
Yeah.
Oh my Lord, could I tell stories that I can't tell?
We've all got stories that we would love to share, but
indeed.
I mean, the reason we're sharing all this stuff is because we have seen the train wrecks. And I've also seen, not so much professionally, because I get the train wrecks as my profession, but I've also seen personally some pretty incredible success stories. And so it is possible to have the dream, right? I remember my grandparents, they had their 60th wedding anniversary, and I asked my grandfather, he'd been married 60 years, and I was expecting some kind of snarky answer from him, like, now that you look back on it, what was it? He says it was one big, long, beautiful dream.
Wow, that's wonderful.
That's Norman Rockwell, right? So there are those stories out there. If you're not in that story, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world, right? There's a way forward. There's a way through this. We can help you if it's a divorce.
Yep.
I'm thinking of what those grandparents of yours must have been like to have that great big long dream. They must have been very patient. They must have been very steady. They must have been all kinds of wonderful things.
All of those, all of the above. Yeah, you're right.
And if those people, if you know, if you talk about where we started this discussion, if you're patient enough to really do the getting to know process slowly and wisely, I think that you won't be visiting us in our offices. But if you do, Shawn, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, if you have any kind of dispute, whether it's a marital dispute or a child dispute or some other kind of dispute, go to WeberDisputeResolution.com. That's Weber with one B, like the grill. WeberDisputeResolution.com, and we will match you with a mediator who can help you resolve your dispute.
Mr. Hill.
You would go to Pacific Divorce Management's website, which is www.pacdivorce.com, PACDIVORCE.com. And our phone numbers and contact information is all there.
And I'm Scott Weiner, and I'm a psychologist. I'm at 619-417-5743, and I answer my own phone, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Three Wise Men of Divorce: Money, Psych, and Law. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share with others who may be in a similar place. Until next time, stay safe, healthy, and focused on a positive, bright future. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Every family law case is unique, so no legal, financial, or mental health advice is intended during this podcast. If you need help with your specific situation, feel free to schedule a time to speak with one of us for a personal consultation.